Hello, and welcome to the show. This is just a short intro before we begin the episode, which I'm sure you will enjoy. We have a few things to share which are specials this weekend. If you're a writer and love the process and inspiration of writing on a classic typewriter, you can experience this magic opportunity by purchasing your very own typewriter. We do also have vintage or antique typewriters. Or if you already have a typewriter and it's broken, we are able to repair it so that your writing process can be that much more beautiful and enjoyable. Whether you're sitting at home at a cafe or traveling the world, you can now be motivated to write anywhere, anytime. Next, staying on the topic of writing. If you would like to purchase my phone book, they are now published and available. The Narcissist Recovery Guidebook, as well as the Grand Soul Awakening calendar collection of inner child poems on friendship and healing, as well as Divine Love Lessons, a poetic love story of returning back to your core self and a human journey of understanding your higher power, which has a touch of synchronicity, numerology, ascension patterns, spiritual insights to soothe the consciousness and support the ego into pure, authentic soulhood. And it's a great gift for yourself or for a friend who appreciates the art of poetry. Next, you can order the personalized art painting, which is perfect for birthday gifts and holidays. And it's just a great opportunity to become creative and to inspire the younger generation or adults as well. And you can also decide which kind of art pieces, which can be seasonal or biblical or a Disney character. So it will be anything that inner child find for. Next, tutoring is also available from grade school to middle school to high school to courses. We have both the math, reading, writing, essay help, resume help, college admissions, essay help, all kinds of tutoring. Last but not least, we have virtual ballet lessons and classes available for all ages and all levels. There are ballet bar workouts included, and all you need is just a little bit of space and a chair or something to hold on to. And this is going to be with accompanying classical orchestra music to bring a sense of levity and joy and just fun overall, while also strengthening the body and adding flexibility and grace to your daily posture. And I have a unique experience as I grew up performing at Lincoln Center with the York City Ballet, with my City Ballet, with Alvin, Ailey, American Dance Theater, and also at Madison Square Garden. So this unique mix of artistic expression has inspired me to create a whole list of ballet choreography, ballet classes, and to inspire people to come along on the journey to awaken their appreciation and their gratitude for body movement and body positivity. And I make sure to share this with everybody, and everybody is open to join. It's available for everybody. And we focus on creating elegant movement to the rhythm of the music, which makes you feel comfortable in your own space, at your own pace, and in your own skin. And this gives you an opportunity to enjoy the journey of imagination, beauty, integration, and through you, a sense of gratitude for yourself, for others, for music, and for movement. Classes are in session and all online. And if you would like to have me on as a guest on your podcast and would like to be a guest on my podcast, please do let me know. And I am also collecting new interviews with upcoming. And for information on any of the things that I have mentioned, if you would like to participate in, or to purchase, or to just join the community, please send me an email at growthandgracemindset@gmail.com. I put all of the logistics of enjoy the show. Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Gratitude podcast, where we talk all things mental health, awakening, awareness, healing, recovery, business, entrepreneurship, and so much more. And today we have a special guest. This is Justine Carino. She is a licensed mental health counselor, anxiety treatment specialist, and host of Thoughts from the Couch podcast. Justine currently maintains a group private practice in New York and Connecticut, and she helps individuals and families decrease symptoms of anxiety and depression, improve their relationships, and set better boundaries. Justine has over 12 years of experience and uses both cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and family systems techniques when working with her clients. Justine's advice has been featured in various media outlets such as Cosmo, The Huffington Post, News 12 Westchester, and the Self-Helpless podcast. She has also been a speaker at top corporations including Eileen Fisher and Lockheed Martin, and interviewed on over 40 podcasts. Her services can be found on her website, carinocounseling.com. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so excited to speak with you on all things mental health and anxiety.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for that really nice intro.
Yes, it's such a beautiful kind of like well-rounded kind of like experience. I feel like so many people are going through anxiety and everyone I feel like are on different waves or levels on mental health struggles. And I feel like depending on where they are in their lives, there are like different timelines in a sense. And I know that since we're going soon into the fall and that autumn shift is like a seasonal thing. And I know there's like seasonal affective disorder. And I think like it's so interesting how like seasons do kind of bring out that. Have you had more clients during the fall? Does that have any kind of like effect?
Absolutely. I think really a busy time starts to be October through probably like March. That's when the most people are seeking therapy. And it could be a variety of different reasons, right? But I think when we start to head in, at least in the Northeast, to the colder, darker months, people aren't feeling as good. And then when we move into that spring, summertime, people are doing things, people are socializing more, which might be a side effect. You know, the more social we are, sometimes the better we feel. People are doing things outdoors. I truly believe being outside can help with your mental health. So people are running outside, hiking outside, just sitting outside. So the need for mental health support does kind of decline. But that being said, I'm still always busy in the summer. Not everyone's problems go away with the good weather. But I would say the busiest seasons are probably October through March.
Wow, yeah, that's so interesting. And I saw that on your page you had said something about like your family or of origin is the blue is the blueprint of your family origin dealing with like emotions and how
Yeah.
you set boundaries. That's super interesting because I've had many clients when we're doing inner child healing work, it all comes down to the family and how they were raised in terms of like how they cope or how they deal with anxiety. And I feel like that's such an interesting point to make. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I feel like so many times it can also be unconscious because it's like how their nervous system was like brought up. It kind of like sets the groundwork for how they kind of like respond or react, especially when there's like trauma, that kind of fight or flight response. It becomes so like limited into kind of like a limited space.
Absolutely. Yeah, our families have such an influence over who we are and who we become, but also the context of the environments we live in, like our communities, our zip codes, what the norms are around us, our culture, our religion. There's so much influence about who we are today and why we are the way we are. But our family relationships, because those tend to be the closest to us as we're children and adolescents, really shape and mold us. And not every parent realizes that. And you don't really realize it yourself until you're like in your 20s and 30s and you look back at your family and you're like, that was really odd that we did things that way, or that was kind of dysfunctional. Why was that normal, right? And we just don't know any different other than what's right in front of us. I remember I had a supervisor once tell me a story to kind of remember this concept. He said that when he was a little boy, his mom always cut his sandwich, his peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right down the middle. And that's how he knew he ate his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then one day he went to a play date at a friend's house and the mom cut the sandwich diagonally. And he cried. And he said, I don't eat my sandwiches this way. You have to cut it down the middle, right? What our family does is what is normal to us. And we learn that people do things differently. It doesn't always mean it's bad or it's wrong. It's just different. So that's just a little glimpse of like how we just become so used to processing emotions, viewing the world, creating beliefs, setting boundaries, having relationships based on the people that raise us.
Wow, that's such an interesting point. Yes, like we do have our unique eccentricities, and so often it does come from that feeling of safety. Hopefully, if we did have that, we don't always experience full safety within growing up, as obviously there's different kinds of experiences and situations that come up. And when people do kind of come across anxiety in adulthood, what is like the number one tip you can give them to kind of like to find that safety within themselves?
Oh, so I think it's a process, right? A lot of how I treat anxiety is through cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's helping people learn their personal relationship between their automatic thoughts, what they're thinking about, how those thoughts then lead to their anxiety, and then what they're doing after they feel that emotion that might reinforce the anxiety. It kind of creates this loop, right? And these loops are automatic. We're not even aware that it's happening. And those automatic thoughts that we have after, a stimulus occurs or a situation happens, those automatic thoughts are really influenced by these deep subconscious beliefs we have about ourselves, others, in the world. So if we take an example, I'll use a basic example. Let's say someone is afraid of dogs, right? And they come to me and they say, I want to be able to live with a dog. I got engaged and my fiance has a dog and we want to move in together and I just don't think I can handle this and I want to be treated for it. Well, the good news is we can, but we go back in time and we say, where did this fear develop, right? And so life experience influenced that. And maybe they say, when I was 3 years old, I was attacked by a dog and I have this scar and I needed plastic surgery. And now today I'm afraid of dogs, right? So there's this belief they developed as a child that dogs are dangerous, scary, and harmful, right? And then they generalize that to every single dog. And then it gets worse. It generalizes even more. When they hear a dog, maybe they don't even see the dog. Just when they hear the dog on the street, they jump, right? And then they generalize even more. They see a picture of a dog on TV and they start to feel scared, right? They're walking in the grocery store and they see the dog food in the aisle. So now this fear starts to generalize deeper and deeper and all around our environment. Before we know it, we're feeling anxious all the time. So we would then try to obviously work with those thoughts that every dog is dangerous and harmful, because not every dog is. We would have them experience and expose them to dogs slowly. Maybe we start with pictures and dog food and smells and barks and then finally touching a dog, right? And then they'll behave in a way that they learn, okay, I can handle this. I can be around a dog. And now we've fixed that loop for them, right? But in the past, the behavior of running away and hiding is what reinforced the anxiety. It made it worse for them, made it scarier.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so interesting. That's like making the immune system stronger. That's a really interesting kind of process. And I know so many people, especially empaths, are kind of like going through that journey through ancestral healing, that sometimes they're even kind of like picking up anxieties from their familial kind of like ancestry, and maybe sometimes it's not even there. So I feel like the work you do, it could be so interesting to pinpoint like the anxieties that maybe are not even theirs, but they don't even know why they have that. And then it comes back to like, oh, this is not even mine. This is might be like somehow implemented from childhood through somebody. So that's super interesting how children are just like sponges, and when they kind of absorb those different things from other people, adults, that really does kind of like yeah, it molds their mind, that it molds their nervous systems, how to react and respond to different stimuli as adults. So and then adults, it's like then we have to figure out why we have so much anxiety. We have to like peel back the layers and kind of like go through that journey in therapy, like you mentioned. That's super, super interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the ancestral trauma, some of it's related to the DNA, right? When we go through a traumatic event, it changes our DNA. And then we pass those genes down to our children, and then they pass it down to their children. So there's really this predisposal of a traumatic response that we don't even know we have until the environment triggers those genes to turn on and become reactive. Some of it is just that conditioning and modeling you're talking about. Maybe as a kid, you always witnessed a parent be so fearful about everything all the time, and maybe they didn't let you do things, and maybe they wanted to always keep you safe and close. And so now you've internalized that the world is dangerous and scary, and then you're less likely to do things and take risks, right? So we pass it down through the DNA, but we also pass it down through like the modeling, through the conversations and behaviors.
That's so true. Yes, 100%. And when it comes to anxiety, as so many of us do have it, are there any positive things to it that we can kind of like incorporate into our daily lifestyle?
Yeah. Well, the thing about anxiety that I always want people to remember is that every single person on this planet is supposed to have it. We need it. Just like it's a feeling just like love, anger, sadness. We are humans that have a range of emotion. And anxiety was actually one of the most useful for us if we think about being cave people, right? So back in the day when we were, evolving and growing as a species, anxiety helped keep us safe, right? If something made us nervous or fearful, we avoided it. And that was a good thing, right? So if we were cave women walking out of our cave and we saw a saber-toothed tiger and felt scared, we ran away. If we didn't feel fear, maybe we'd approach it and then we'd be dead, right? So anxiety is part of this fight, flight, or freeze response system in our nervous system that is so useful to keep us alive. When it becomes a problem is when it starts going in overdrive. That feeling is consistent and persistent, and it starts to interfere with our daily functioning, interferes with our personal goals, maybe interferes with our relationships. And that's when we want to start to treat it and work on it and overcome it. But there's a normal range of anxiety that people have every day. And sometimes it's a good thing. It prompts us to like be prepared for an event. It can prompt us to think things through. It can prompt us to problem solve. It can prompt us to keep us safe, right? If you walk in a building and you're smelling smoke and you feel anxious and leave, great, it worked. It got you out of a fire, perhaps. So it can be very useful at times. We just have to learn when to react to it in rational ways and irrational ways.
I love that. That is such a good point. Anxiety is like it's just a different kind of energy, and if we kind of take it and we kind of like become present with it, and it's really hard to find that presence through anxiety, but once we kind of tune into the present moment, I feel like yes, it's so true. Like you said, anxiety can teach us so many things that will help us at the end of the day. So that's such a good point. And
Yeah.
like when it does come to anxiety, how does it usually manifest in the body? Is this kind of like a collective thing, or it manifests like differently in every person?
Yeah. So I always look at it as like behaviors and thoughts, right? So someone who's anxious, their thoughts might be racing. They might have perseverations or ruminating thoughts or preoccupations. They can't stop thinking about these things. They can't let the thoughts go. There's excessive worry. They're catastrophizing. They're thinking of the worst case scenarios. They're so distracted by these thoughts, right? Behaviorally and in our body, sometimes people have very physical symptoms. And it's very common for people to seek doctors first before a therapist because their anxiety does feel like they're either having a heart attack because their heart is beating so fast. Maybe they think they have intestinal issues because they always have stomach aches. Sometimes they get diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome and it's really anxiety. Some people get frequent headaches or migraines. Sometimes people get chest pain. So there's a lot of physical symptoms that people experience. And then they seek a doctor first, and the doctor's like, you're fine. There's no medical cause. You should probably talk to a therapist and see if you're stressed, see if you're anxious. So it's a combination of the thoughts that are present because of anxiety and how our body feels. People get really restless, fidgety, really impulsive, make impulsive decisions. Sometimes people even faint. They get dizziness. So it could really occupy their body. And I always tell people, see a doctor first. We want to make sure you are cleared of a medical issue. And if you're cleared, then we got to figure out how to treat this anxiety.
Wow, yeah. I do remember some people I was talking to who had so much anxiety, and this is probably not, obviously not for every case, but they did have something with like digestion, and it's something connected to like the gut-brain axis or something. And
Yes.
it was like with digestion, something was unbalanced. And when they kind of like, they did go to a doctor, and I think they had to take some kind of extra tests to kind of find that the issue. And when they were able to kind of like, I guess, change the bacteria within the gut, that calmed down their anxiety. So I think
Wow.
yeah, it's so interesting how the gut brain connection is that interesting. And it's like, if we're able to go there first and to kind of rule out any issues there, because oftentimes the gut does, I think, play a role. And like you mentioned, having like, a tummy ache or something, like, is it the brain sending it to the gut or the gut to the brain? It's like, that's so interesting how the communication of our neurons, like, communicate with each other.
Absolutely. And I think part of it too is when we are anxious and that fight, flight, or freeze is set off, we release a lot of chemicals in our intestines, in our stomach. And sometimes that causes overgrowth of chemicals in there, or bacteria. And sometimes if we could treat that, that alleviates some of the anxiety. But there's a ton of chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline that get released, and they get released in the gut, and that can build up over time.
Yes, that's so true. Yes. And is that what like over functioning anxiety comes from, like from being like hyper anxious all the time?
Yeah, for sure. Anxiety can look different in so many people. Some people describe it like they're so physically uncomfortable. They cannot think about anything else. It just like takes over their day. They can't make it to work. They can't make it to school. They kind of feel frozen, right? That's sometimes how people experience it. Others kind of have what we call this high functioning anxiety, where it's like they could do everything they're supposed to do. They're responsible as a parent, at work, at home, but in the back of their mind, there's this lingering worry, lingering fears. They have a stomach ache or they feel anxious, but like it doesn't debilitate them. So they're always carrying around like this load of anxiety that just circulates and circulates and circulates until finally we figure out a way to help them take some of that baggage off, those rocks in their backpack.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. What kind of things? This is like talk therapy or like more like cognitive stuff?
A little bit of everything. I like to teach people the cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. I also want people to know how important it is to meditate, how important it is to move our bodies, how important it is to get good sleep, drink enough water. So I like to treat it really holistically. So I go over what I call a mental health routine with my clients that I'm working with about anxiety, because I need to know, like, at a baseline, what are you doing every day? Are you sleeping enough? Are you drinking 10 cups of coffee? Maybe we need to cut that back, right? Are you using substances? Like, what are you doing to your body and your mind that's going to make you vulnerable to high stress and anxiety? Let's clear that first. And then once we have a good routine going where you're exercising, you're sleeping, you're nourishing your body, you're not surviving off sugar or nicotine, then we can talk about the mind part. So it's a little combination of everything.
I love that. Yes, it is so true. It goes back to the routine and how you kind of like prioritize the things you prioritize. Because I remember when I grew up, I took kind of dancing and performing. So that was always my place to like relax and meditate, even though I was like very physically moving and dancing. And when we had like summer break, we we didn't have to go to dance for like a couple of weeks. And then the first few days were like great. I was like, I felt so like I'm not doing anything. I don't have to exert myself so much. But then like the next like week or so, I start to feel like a little bit like hyper and like a little bit like kind of like anxiety a little bit starts to come up to be like, okay, I have to do something. I have to be more productive. I feel like I want to do stuff. So I feel like that's another message that anxiety is like telling us, redirect to something productive. And maybe sometimes that is the case for us to do.
Absolutely. And I love that you observed that about yourself and you notice the difference from moving your body and being still. And so many brain scans show how awesome movement is. It just energizes us, it helps us process things, it helps us think clearly.
Yes, yeah, yes, for sure. You're talking about being the black sheep of the family. I feel like so many empaths go through this, and they're
Mm.
like the first ones who experience that deep self-awareness of all that ancestral trauma and kind of like going through the experience of awakening and learning about themselves and kind of realizing like, oh, like maybe I did have anxiety as a kid because like I wasn't taken seriously or I wasn't accepted in some ways. What advice do you have for the black sheep?
Yeah, I love the black sheep of the family. I love the people that come in my office and they're like, I'm so different than my family. I was the rebel, or I was this, or now I'm the black sheep because I think this way and they don't think that way. And I think the black sheep are really brave. I think subconsciously the black sheep call attention to what might not be going well in this family or hasn't been going well for generation and generation. And they're often the strongest to tolerate that dysfunction that hasn't been dealt with. And the black sheep could be a great distraction, right? So let's imagine in the family, you are the oldest sibling and you're the quote unquote black sheep for some reason. You being the problem took put a lot of attention on you. And so then mom and dad didn't have to look at themselves. Mom and dad didn't have to look at their marriage and what was going on there. Mom and dad didn't have to look at your other siblings. Your siblings didn't have to look at each other, right? You are a great distraction for what's going on. And usually when the black sheep recovers, and I'm using quotations, or changes or is on a really good path, the family has a hard time adapting to that because now like the black sheep doesn't serve that purpose anymore, and now the family has to look at each other and be like, oh, maybe it wasn't just them. We're struggling with our marriage, or we're struggling with youngest sibling doing this. So it's interesting how family dynamics can shift and change when roles shift and change. But for the black sheep, I would say, first of all, get to know yourself, get to know why you're the black sheep. Is there anything to work on, right? Because sometimes there is. And then learn how to communicate better with your family. And there's a level of acceptance that maybe your family is different than you and you are different from them, but that doesn't mean we need to disconnect and cut off. That means we can have some growth and change or what our expectations are, how we have relationships with our family members as adults, what boundaries do we need to put in place to make that work and feel connected, um, and talk to your family about the role you feel you've played with them over the years and try and make changes around it.
That's beautiful. Yes, that's the empath journey 101.
Yes, yes, for sure.
Yes, and when it comes to like relationships, I know a lot of people also experience the high functioning anxiety if they carry it from their childhood and they kind of like continue those roles from childhood into their relationship. I feel like that's tricky for a lot of us because we want a successful relationship, so we kind of like put so much pressure on ourselves to be like perfect. And then the micromanaging starts and those kind of those little things that lead to arguments because nobody wants to be controlled, and then especially if like, you don't realize you're controlling somebody until they point it out, and then you get so like upset because it's like that wasn't your intention, and it's like a whole cycle. Do you have a lot of like relationship issues also that people kind of come to for?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of couples, and the I would say the person who's more perfectionistic or type A or a little anxious tends to be the over functioner in the relationship or the marriage. They're taking on a lot of tasks to make the household run smoothly. They're like the family manager, and they do come off as a control freak sometimes, and they're told that, and then their feelings are hurt. And also say, if I didn't control everything, nothing would be getting done, right? So there's a huge dynamic. Sometimes overfunctioners actually are subconsciously attracted to an underfunctioner to relive that role. So let's pretend the overfunctioner, the perfectionist, the type A, while growing up, going back to family systems and how they influence us, maybe they were like the parentified child in the family. They were really responsible. They were taking care of everything. They were keeping the family functioning, moving forward. Maybe there was divorce. Maybe there's substance abuse. Who knows? But they held the family together. And now they're attracted to a partner that they have to take care of. And they say they hate it on a conscious level, but we replay these roles subconsciously, and then they're in a marriage where they've attracted a partner who's really dependent on them and they can't stand it anymore. And then that's the work that we need to do. Or it could just be that the partner can function very well on their own, and the overfunctioner just doesn't trust them to do it well, and the overfunctioner needs a lot of control, and that could be really hard too in a relationship.
Yes. Wow. That's amazing. Yes, that's so the truth. What advice would you give to somebody who is that kind of like hyper micromanaging, and like they're in a relationship that they feel like if they don't control, it's going to fall apart?
So, communication, communicate with your partner that you feel like you can't trust them to be responsible or reliable or follow through. I would say that's step one. Two, if the partner says, listen, calm down, I can do it. I might not do it as well as you or perfectly or to these perfectionistic standards, but I can do it. You need to trust me. Then the overfunctioner needs to let go and be uncomfortable. And a lot of people with anxiety have a hard time being uncomfortable. And the true progress is allowing yourself to be uncomfortable and tolerate it and then see the outcome. It's usually not as bad as we think it is. And then when we get that experience of letting go and realizing things are still okay, that's when the anxiety can come.
Wow, I love that. I feel like that's a great point, because so many people are kind of in that state subconsciously, and then it takes a very long time to kind of bring to the surface, because kind of it's that fight or flight response. Like we kind of like want to avoid that fight or flight response sometimes, and that's why we do that. Is it connected to fight or flight also to like the nervous system?
For sure, because someone who's over functioning is probably anxious about something. And when they're anxious about something, usually that fight, flight, or freeze is turned on. And their version of fight is probably doing, right? I'm going to do. That's their version of fight. Fleeing would be the avoider, right? The avoider doesn't want to get anything. The fighter's doing and probably doing too much.
Wow, that's so interesting. And when it comes to like family dynamics, what kind of techniques do you do to like kind of assist with family support, especially with like kids involved? Because we have a lot of like teen listeners as well who do go through anxiety.
Yeah, one thing that I always do with every single client, whether they're an individual, couple, or family, is called a genogram. And the genogram is a 3-generational family tree that I draw out with them. And I'm getting details. Like, I want to know when people met and got married, who's been divorced, what kind of jobs they had, what kind of education they had, what their religions are, what their culture is, who fought with who, were the parents strict, were they lenient. I'm getting in that family system and getting details, and then pointing out patterns and say, well, grandma and grandpa tolerated their son's alcoholism and addiction, and now you're tolerating your husband's alcohol and addiction. That's interesting. There's a pattern here in this family that's tolerating substance abuse, right? And so we pull out themes and patterns. Or there's this unspoken pressure because everyone in the family went to Harvard, and now you feel like you have to go to Harvard, but you want to be a musician and not even go to college, and now you're petrified to tell your parents that, right? So that genogram helps us see patterns and helps the client see patterns that they have not been aware of before. And then also I look for the roles, right? Who's the rebel of the family? Who's the golden child? Who's the peacemaker? Who's the smart one? Who's the bad one, right? Families have labels and roles for each other. And once we get them talking about it, we try and shift those roles up a little bit.
Wow, that's amazing. And it totally goes back to like kind of like ancestry, but going back to family
Yes.
foods. I love that so much.
Yes. Yes.
That's absolutely amazing. And where can people connect with you and see your content?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm on Instagram and the handle is Thoughts from the Couch. I have a website, carinocounseling.com. There you can find my podcast episodes, you can find blog posts, you could see all the services that I provide. I do therapy in New York State and Connecticut, but for people outside of New York and Connecticut, I offer anxiety coaching services, which is a little bit different, but really a great opportunity for those that want to work with me, but they just can't, get their butt in my office.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It had such a great conversation, and I feel like our listeners are going to learn so much about like anxiety. And thank you for kind of like sharing your journey of like helping people, because I feel like we all need that kind of support system to help us just function in today's age.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored, and I hope listeners take something with them from listening to this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.